what is true for every person, whether you don't have any money or you have billions, is you will have and face levels of suffering. And when we do, how do we handle that? Welcome to the Good Steward Podcast. Chris Evans here. And I want to share my journey from building a $70 million consulting business to losing it all. Together, we're going to explore the lessons of loss, burnout, and redefining success, finding true peace, joy, and contentment along the way. Welcome back, everybody, to the Good Steward Podcast here with Chris Evans and Mr. Johnny Nell. It's good to be back. We were off last week from recording. I was actually in the mountains with the family trying to fish. We had a bit of a hard time. It was challenging conditions, but it was a good time together. But glad to be back talking about what we're talking about today. How was your week? How was your week off?
Dude, it was really good. Really good. Getting closer to the end of 2024.
It's crazy.
It's been a good year. It's been a good year, mate. Really good. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. A lot of stripping this year. A lot of breaking down of old things and pruning.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome back, everyone. So today we are diving into quite a profound topic. It goes into how suffering, though difficult, can actually lead to growth and transformation. So as we hear the insights Chris will be sharing, you might find new ways to view and process your own challenges. And I hope that you could take something from it. But without further ado, mate, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I think this episode is really important, and it's still, I don't think there's ever a time when you don't need this message, because of course we are talking about suffering today. I'll share a bit about my own experience, but the truth of life is we can't control life. We can't control what happens. That could be financial, that could be emotional, that could be relationships, that could be economic, physical, health. And so what is true for every person, whether you don't have any money or you have billions, is you will have and face levels of suffering. And when we do, how do we handle that? And I think that's really important for us to dive into today. And it's still top of mind for me. And something I'll share maybe at the end of this podcast on why that's the case and how I really feel like if you're listening to this, you're supposed to hear this episode. So please listen to the end, because I think it's important for you.
So Chris, let's start this off. You've been through quite a bit of significant challenges in your journey. How has your perspective on suffering changed over time?
I think growing up in the West, we are really conditioned to avoid suffering at all costs. Suffering is seen as something that you do not want. It's not good. And as an entrepreneur, I think so much of my life, I mentioned this before, but so much of my life was built around the avoidance of any kind of suffering. I essentially built my life to not suffer at all. I think because there was forms of suffering growing up, and how that and the environment that I grew up in, and again, not that it was just all bad or unhealthy, or I lived in a dog cage or anything like that, and ate dog food, but forms of suffering that imprinted on me that you don't want it, it's bad. So for me, there has been a major shift in not having any value system. My belief is that suffering is bad, avoid it at all costs. And my belief system about suffering has changed to where I'm actually coming to a place of embracing suffering. And of course, I'm not seeking out to suffer, really. Maybe to a small degree, like cold plunging or getting in the sauna or working out hard. But macro, big suffering, I'm not seeking those things out, but realizing that I can't control it. And when it does come, how it can shape me and mold me into a better and healthier person. That is the opportunity of suffering. So it's gone from a place of tremendous fear of suffering to finding freedom in the process of suffering, and to not avoid it, but really embrace it, because whether we like it or not, it's going to happen to us, right? It might be massive degrees or it might be micro aspects of suffering. And the more we embrace it, I think the more we can benefit from it.
It's so powerful, man. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. I think a lot of people listening would resonate with the idea that the deepest losses could clarify what really matters. Taking that into consideration, can you share a specific example of how you've used a difficult experience for personal growth?
So the business, that was part of how I avoided suffering. It was making as much money as possible, as fast as possible, having all the conveniences, flying private, having the, like all those things that were essentially building a padded room for myself that I wasn't convenienced in the least. And all those things where I put my identity in the money, the success, the business, as a form of avoiding suffering to a degree. And so losing all of that stuff that I leaned on and tied my identity into and that I used to avoid any kind of suffering, that being stripped away was the greatest suffering I'd ever experienced, because I had my security in those things. I had my identity in those things. So losing that, I felt completely laid bare and stripped and entered, as we've talked about before, the dark night of the soul, the greatest, my era of suffering I was inducted into. Yeah, it was tremendously painful because it really caused me to question my belief system and thinking that success and climbing the mountain, all those things that we do as entrepreneurs, was the ultimate thing to achieve and to do, and to lose those things, to be at such a realization that it doesn't give you what it promises, was such an intense level of suffering. And of course, not having my business partner and all those things that I clung to for many years was really intense. And so thankfully, though, without it, I would not have been, it wouldn't have presented the opportunity for me to question those things and to come into my true identity and to allow all those false things to be stripped away. Even last night we were talking about dinner table, and Missy was mentioning just how my response to things is different, how I'm more patient and kind and loving. Dude, that is the fruit of suffering. And I'm really grateful for it. And I think that we usually have, we don't usually, we do. Every situation, we have two options. Option one, we let go. We let that process do what it needs to do. Option two, we hold on and we try to maintain. We try to keep the facade together and not let the suffering work the process that it needs to work. And of course, my worldview, right, and what we've talked about, it's a Jesus worldview, and that there is an ultimate benefit and end to the process of suffering, because the desire that Jesus has of us is for us to become like him. He was the greatest person that ever lived. He was humble and meek and gentle and kind and had patience. Like, how is this even possible? And that really is the opportunity from that worldview to allow ourselves to experience suffering, no matter if it's great or small.
What did you just share there? Something struck a chord there. Losing the business, it sounds like it was such a powerful turning point, Chris. And it's amazing how you allowed that pain to shape your new sense of identity and clarity. You mentioned the example of Jesus throughout this journey, and what would you say the role has been when you take into consideration how faith was part of helping you process and overcome these challenges?
Ultimately, it gave me hope. It gave me hope, man. There's no hope in the things of this world. And now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of delight and a lot of benefits in material things, and there's good things there. But we cling to it as if it were a god. Hey y'all, Chris here, just jumping in. I want to tell you about the Good Steward newsletter. If you're not on that, go to chrisaevans.com/newsletter. chrisaevans.com/newsletter, and get on that. It's a weekly newsletter. And I write a lot about my experience in business, growth, faith, family, really all the things that if you're listening to this, I think that you could find a lot of value in it. And it is written by me for you. Go check it out. And as someone who is a believer, I would even say that was the case for me. I clung to money. I grabbed as tight of that thing as I could, and the success and the accolades and the position and the platform. And ultimately, there was no hope in that. There was no fulfillment in that. And so to come to a place where that thing I clung to so hard being stripped away and the pain of that, but then experiencing profound peace and hope that this process is actually a beneficial process for me. Like it is actually for me to be fashioned into a healthier individual, to where I have a sense that I no longer need those things. And thank God that I don't have the drive and ambition, the selfish drive, selfish ambition towards those things again, because it just leaves you empty. So changing my perspective of suffering has been a big part of my faith, being involved in that and seeing that suffering is not the end in of itself, right? Suffering is a process that brings us to greater maturity and greater character and developing in who we are becoming as humans. And it goes back to our identity and the shaping and sharpening of that identity, the true us, that who we are aside from all the things that we have and the position and status, to the person who can become like a child, innocent, guileless, loving, kind, merciful. I think that is the end. That is what we're called to. And that is what I'm finding the greatest fulfillment and satisfaction in, to be available emotionally and spiritually. Post-suffering, man, like I just don't see it happening. And this is why I think this is a little bit of a different twist to this episode, but why I do think from a greater level, and I'm going to share a story here in a second, but a greater level of suffering is going to and needs to come to the West from a spiritual standpoint, because there is a story that is written, and that story is God will have his way, and there will be an end to this world as we know it. And we have the option and the choice to either turn our heart to God or not. And if we have other things that take his place, usually the story of history of humans is that we often choose those other things, right? Whether it's the gold or the position or whatever. And so just in my own experience of suffering, knowing that I did place my hope and trust in those other things, and until suffering came, that's when the change really came for me. I think from a macro social standpoint, that has to happen for us as a society to turn our hearts back to God. And you've seen this like with the Israelites, right? How many times they've suffered, turned back to God, and then went astray, turned back to God. But the story real quick is, I have a friend who went to Vietnam, and she was talking to Vietnam. There's been a tremendous persecution there. And so the church has been underground for years. And this time when she went, I don't know if it's still the case, but she was talking to an older lady who led this house church movement, thousands of people. My friend said, of course, he was empathizing. I'm so sorry. We're praying for suffering to end. And the lady stopped her. This older lady stopped her dead in her tracks and says, don't do that. Because she understood the value of suffering. And she said, I'm praying for America. I don't pray for blessing and prosperity. I pray for suffering to come. Because in that moment often is when we will be at our wits' end. We'll be at the end of our rope, and we will turn our hearts to God.
I love how your faith reframes suffering as part of becoming. rather than just something to get through. It reminds us that who we are becoming might actually be the whole point. I think many of us will
Exactly.
find comfort in that perspective. What are some practical techniques you use for processing pain and growing from it, Chris?
Oh man. Yeah, it's not. Listen, anybody listening, if you're experiencing pain or form of suffering, I have complete empathy for you and compassion. And it's not an easy thing. It's a very difficult thing. And so I don't claim to have it all figured out, but there are things that help me to process suffering in a better way than I did before. And a lot of it starts with our imagination. There is usually a tendency as humans, especially in the West, that we make suffering more and bigger than it is. And we oftentimes bring suffering on ourselves when that actually is not the case. When really what's wrong is our perspective of the situation that we're in. That's the thing that needs to change. So every day I'm usually meditating and setting my mind, renewing my mind to a healthy value system. And that's a reference to Romans 12:2. It's a daily practice to have. And what am I setting my mind to? Am I allowing my mind to ruminate on things that are not good, that are not for me, that won't benefit me? Or am I actively engaging my mind to imagine good things, healthy things? Even, I've thought about and gone through this process, imagining things of suffering and imagine it to the end of that process. Whatever that situation might be for you, maybe a business not working out, maybe a lawsuit, maybe a relationship not working out, going to the end of the scenario. And Johnny, you and I have talked about this, the what ifs and re-changing our cognitions and reprogramming. But the hardest thing for humans to do is to change their behaviors. And so this is something that when we start to change our thinking, change our beliefs, and just slowly be patient in changing those behaviors and how we're thinking and responding to these thoughts that really can enhance or inflate the feelings of suffering or deflate them. I think so much of that starts in our minds. And of course, part of that is seeing the value of suffering, changing the perspective of the actual suffering. That's really important. Who are you becoming through that process? And so one of the things that I've done is I've actually journaled how I've changed as a person. And I have a list of all these things and even what other people have said about me through this process of suffering. And there's so many positive, beautiful things. But if I'm only fixed on the negative, on the downside, yeah, man, that's going to suck. That's going to suck really bad. But be proactive in finding the positives in the suffering. Journaling every day is really important. Processing those emotions and mindsets with wise people is really important. So those are a few things that I would really encourage, making it a daily practice to see the benefits and the positives of the suffering that you might be experiencing. I'm a lot more open-handed now. I'm a lot less prone to control. Before, it was controlling every aspect that I possibly could because that meant that I would avoid suffering. And so with our tendencies to control, so much can be an indication that we don't value any level of suffering. So listen, you entrepreneur listening to this, if you like to control everything, this episode's for you for sure, because that means there's something there about suffering that you don't value, and your belief system might be that it's the worst thing ever. And again, this could be a very small thing, like being inconvenienced, right? Or your team member screwing up. Like there's levels to that micro to losing a business or losing a lot of money, which I, of course, have both. So seeing those things, whatever the challenge is, as opportunities rather than setbacks. And asking the question, how am I allowing this to shape me and mold me to be a better person, kinder, wiser, more compassionate, more empathetic? And so here's the benefit that I'm seeing this is the fruit of my life with the people that are directly connected with me, especially my family. The conversations that I'm having with my family and my kids, and to see their development. Of course, they've seen my suffering. They've seen the brokenness in this guy that was at the top down to the bottom, like some days crying. And so they've seen that vulnerability. And I think that has already started to pay massive dividends in their development, in their growth, in how they see the world. So if it was nothing else but that being the fruit, it would be well worth it. And so taking those perspectives and values of, man, there's so many benefits to this process of suffering. Because here's the thing about suffering, I think that we don't like is we see it as a setback. We see it as failure. And that says something about us. And that's why I think we avoid it at all costs. Versus, no, man, I'm actually being sharpened and shaped. And I so much of my life has been in fear and living in fear. And even though I've taken massive risks, I've still dealt a lot with fear. And I think it all connects here. And the more that I have the mindset that maybe there's really, what if there is not really suffering unless I perceive it that way? Then I think that my actions will be less connected or wrapped in any kind of fear. And that's how I want to live, dude. I want to live fearless in my true identity. And I think that's part of seeing the different perspective of what suffering is.
That's an incredible shift, Chris. It really is. Especially seeing setbacks as opportunities. That really changes everything. What would you say to someone who's in the midst of suffering right now and can't see any potential for growth?
I would say that I'm really sorry for what you're experiencing. I can understand that it could be very difficult and challenging, and you might not see any way out, but there is hope. There absolutely 100% is hope. And I think to surround yourself with people who have suffered, this could be a podcast. This could be a YouTube video, right? People who have suffered tremendous levels in their life, but have clung to hope. Surround yourself with that environment and listening to those people speak, I think will start to help to shape your perspective in a new way and how you see your suffering. There's just one book that was really impactful for me in this process. It was called Hang On, Let Go by Frank Viola. Really almost like daily kind of devotionals about suffering. He just writes from his experience, and surrounding yourself with that type of content stuff is going to help shape and reorganize your belief system, your perspectives, so that the suffering is not, it's almost telling you earlier that, and we did these workouts on Friday and I tweaked my muscle. Then to morning we were working with our trainer and I was doing these wall ball sit-ups with a 16 weight wall ball. And I just felt, I did this one setup and immediately I felt my muscles inflame. Those muscles that were tweaked. That's how I see suffering. Like you might tweak something, right? But if we don't take care of it, we'll have inflammation. That just makes it exponentially worse. So don't inflame your suffering by ruminating, by having the wrong perspective, by thinking that you're going to die. Try to find a healthy perspective and ask, how is this making me a better person? And start to try to imagine goodness out of your suffering, beauty from the ashes. And when you do that, you'll feel your body actually change. Now, it takes work. You've seen this. You go through a lot of this process. It takes a lot of work and conversation. So surrounding yourself with good people, good information is really important. Anything you would add to that?
Yeah, a big part to this is the perception, right? It's the mindset that we have of suffering and seeing it differently, seeing that suffering essentially will open the door to growth, even if we can't see it yet. It's good to find reassurance in that way of thinking.
One thing to add, so I have a house church with some friends and a few families. We just get together and do church together, basically. And I spoke 2 Sundays ago, and basically I spoke on this idea of remembering the good things in your life and what God has done for you. The Bible says that every good thing is from above. And I believe that. If we understand how involved God is in our lives and how intentional he is, man, every good thing is a gift. And even hard things can be a gift. And so I would encourage you. I have this little book that I carry around. It's like a 3.5 by 5 little notebook where I've just gone, I've prayed and I've asked God and I've remembered what are good things that have happened. And so when I have a moment where I feel just bummed out or I feel a level of suffering or somehow I'm in this cycle of thinking about the losses, I'm thinking about being in the red, so to speak, I pull out that book and I just start to cover myself with goodness in my life and so many good things that have happened to me and how God's come through or someone's spoken a word to me that was really life-giving. So I'd encourage you, take some time today. If you're experiencing suffering and go and remember good things that have happened to you in your life and ruminate on those things. And I bet that you will have a better sense, a better immediate feeling in your emotions, in your perspective.
Amen. Something that came to mind now when you were sharing that. Everything is God's, right? Nothing is really ours. We get an opportunity to be entrusted with something for a season, some seasons longer than others. But ultimately, it's God's. This world is the Lord's. It's not ours. We're in control of it, and He trusts us with it.
Yeah.
But mainly to know that it's not ours, in the sense that we're claiming identity to it. It's actually the Lord's. And that is such a comforting thought to know that I need to be a good steward with what is placed in my responsibility right now, at this time in this season. But also knowing that this is not really mine, right? It's the Lord's that I need to take care of. And knowing that it's the Lord's, whatever it may be, it can help with grabbing onto these accolades and materialistic things, as we would call it. And just knowing that at the end of the day, this can be taken away tomorrow. But where's my heart at? Where am I positioned at that time? Am I still going to put the Lord first? Am I still going to be diligent and seek Him, be in His Word, trust in Him, believe in Him, even though we don't know what's coming? And that's just, it's such an important part of this journey. Whether you're in business or whether you're an employee, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we all have responsibilities in different areas and in different fronts that we need to steward, and we need to be responsible for and take responsibility for it. And that can easily become hard. And I think that's where the subtle arrogance starts to breed. That's when we want to start to grab these things and we want to make it ours. It's mine. Yeah, I worked for that. But ultimately, we developed to be able to maybe receive it at that time. But it's not truly ours. We've been entrusted with it. And that's a blessing by itself. Knowing that the Lord will even trust us with that. And even if it was to take it away for us to learn, it's definitely a blessing in disguise. And as you mentioned it earlier, Chris, whether you can see it or not, change your perspective on suffering. Because if you are currently suffering in whichever way, shape, or form, try to see, what's the Lord trying to show me in this? What can I learn through this? And how can I change to be in accordance with what needs to happen?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, man. It just makes me think about this thought is our circumstances always reveal our character. Case in point, the circumstance of me losing things and how I went into a tailspin. That revealed things in me. And the fact that I trusted in those things more than God. I held on to those things more than God. So rightly, suffering's going to happen, right? Because those things essentially were my God. They were my idol. They were my source. And so I'm grateful in the fact that those things were stripped away, because they were dead, false gods, to bring me to my true love. That was a process of those belief patterns and those perspectives being broken, to know that, yeah, that's not the way, that's not the path. And of course, it's almost like a rebirth, man, becoming a new person, or really allowing all that stuff to be stripped away for the real person that's there to come forward.
Dude,
and
so tough, eh?
So tough. And so many people, I think, will not choose that direction. And I don't think I would have chosen it if it wouldn't have been as extreme. If I had other routes to take, I probably would have taken those routes. But I felt like, man, I'm just here to have a certain death, so to speak. And so in this, like, it's not doom and gloom by any stretch of the imagination. If you're listening, it's hope. It is hope. And it was very painful. And I still at some points feel pain and feel grief about it. But I'm so grateful, because I feel like I've been set free. I feel like I have a freedom like I've never had before. I felt like, if I were to be really honest with my wealth and riches and material things, yeah, great, a lot of fun. But man, I felt like I was imprisoned. I was. And so I'm really glad for the suffering, because it's caused me to see a heavenly kingdom biblical value system that is completely different and upside down from how we view things in the world. And I think until we allow ourselves to enter that level of suffering, we often will just be attached to that worldly value system and perspective that is unhealthy. It's a worldly wisdom. That, yeah, you pursue these things, you put your trust in your bank account, all your hope is in that thing. You try to get that level of success and achievement. And thank God if you're going through suffering, because I believe that this is an opportunity for you to be shaped and molded into who God wants you to be. And those things are not usually public things. Are you thinking about Job, man, in the Bible? This dude was very wealthy, right? He had all the accolades, a huge family. He lost everything. And still he believed that God was good. And of course, the story goes on that there was restoration. But man, we can't control the seasons of suffering in our life, the testing, the trials, the tribulations, but we can allow it to mold us into a good, healthy individual who puts our trust and hope in the Lord. And that's, I think, the point.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, man. It's a daily choice. It's truly, as you mentioned, I go through it up until today, thinking of, is this desire selfish, or is this for the Lord?
Yeah.
And everyone listening, you might feel that you've got ambitions to scale the business and to grow in a lot of different ways, and we all are on different paths. But Chris, like you mentioned a few episodes ago, it comes down to the why. Please don't misunderstand me. What is the intention behind that drive? Do I want to build another 7, 8, 9, 10-figure business for my own pleasure? How is this going to glorify the Lord through what I do? Because ultimately, as he mentions, we can have everything we want, but the prerequisite there is, do we know him first? Do we seek the kingdom and his righteousness first? It's a good thought to take into consideration, and to make sure that how can we discern and how can we evaluate ourselves on a daily basis. I think that's the most important thing. Very important. Chris, as we're heading here to a close, I just had one thought. You've maintained quite a fantastic consistency within growth and having a growth mindset. How would you say to everyone listening, do you consistently maintain this when facing new challenges that come up?
Yeah, I'd say utilize your imagination for envisioning a good future. Jeremiah 29 says that the Lord has good plans for you. Imagine that, envision it. And even envisioning in suffering, the goodness is there and that there's redemption in all things. Now, again, prerequisite is that you are a follower of Jesus, like the spiritual aspect of that. And if you are submitted to him and seek his kingdom first, all things are going to work out for the good. Like that's a promise. And starting to identify what are those old patterns that don't serve me, those old ways of thinking that don't serve me. And let's start to create new patterns and practices. And these are things that we've already talked about, right? Your imagination, your envisioning, meditating, identifying those things, ways of thinking that aren't good. Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned this book before, but Feeling Good by Dr. Burns. He talks a lot about mental distortions in that book, how we distort via our cognitions, our thinking. Get that book as well as the other one I mentioned and go through those distortions so you can get awareness on your thinking. And it's something like I read, our thinking is, I think, 95% subconscious, like a crazy high percentage. That's wild. That means that those are programs that are just running. And if they're programs that we didn't program, right? Again, suffering avoidance, that's bad. Failure's bad. All the things that we talked about. Man, we got to start changing those programs. And so we need to get awareness of those programs. And maybe at some point we'll release a training that is more detailed step by step on how to do that. And it was funny. So this morning I was just thinking about my life of uncertainty. We were talking about it at dinner last night, and that is a form of suffering, right? Because I still have the tendency, I still want to control things. I still want to what is it going to look like? What's the future? And so I was just thinking this morning, I was just actually meditating, and I was thinking about suffering. I was meditating on Romans 5:3. I had no idea what we were talking about on the podcast today. So in my time of silence and solitude and just reflection and meditating and prayer, and I was like, I'm going to check out what the podcast was. And it happened to be, we're talking about suffering. And then I was like, I wonder what the verse is. Because on every episode, we have a verse that we give. It's Romans 5:3-5, the passage that I was meditating on this morning. I was like, okay, come on. So this is not only for me, but I believe it's for you, anybody listening. And the verse is, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, right? That you have so much peace and hope that you can transcend suffering. Like you have so much joy that you're rejoicing. Not only can you tolerate it and deal with it, but that you're able to transcend the suffering because your hope is in God and who you're becoming in this process. So he goes on to say, knowing that our suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame. That's important because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So I encourage you to go check that out. Think about that. Meditate on it. It's been very impactful for me.
Amen. That's a beautiful verse. And again, Chris, thank you. Thank you for your honesty and your wisdom and just being
absolutely
open to being vulnerable, man, and sharing your experience. I hope everyone listening feels a renewed sense of hope that even in pain, that there's potential for growth. So guys, thank you all for checking in. We've got a special episode coming up next week, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't yet, you are free to go check out the Good Steward newsletter. And if there's any questions, any queries, or any concerns that you may have, please do reach out to us to support@chrisaevans.com. Chris, is there anything else from your side before we wrap up?
Yeah, share this with someone who you feel like needs it. For sure. That would be a blessing, and we'd appreciate it. Thanks for your time, y'all.